Hello and welcome to Yesterday's Airlines, where we will be taking a look at the JC Wings November/December release set, which was just announced a few days ago. Now, JC Wings have reoriented their releases this year, so this is the 12th set of the year, but it is still being called the November set in some circles. I'm going to be calling this the November-December set. I think I understand why they've done this now, but I can't talk about it. So let's move swiftly on. It is the November/December set. This year for JC Wings has been a little frustrating, I think, probably for themselves as well as for collectors. They have previously ramped up their release schedule and were putting out more models than they had in previous years, but that has definitely come down in number quite a lot. They've seemingly been struggling to get production really pushing along this year, and so the release sets are now smaller than they were. In fact, there are only 13 models in this set, so it's quite a bit smaller than a release would have been at the start of the year. But at least half of this set have photographs associated with them, so will be seen relatively soon. So you've got roughly a 50-50 split, I would say, of models that will appear in 4 to 5 months and models that will appear in 1 to 2 years. So, as always, we will be checking out those models, and it is quite a nice little selection this month, I have to say. So, before we get into that, just want to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed to the channel and chucks likes on the videos. I really appreciate that. And please do subscribe, because there is plenty of content upcoming on the channel as always, and it's growing very nicely. So thanks to everyone who has done that, and please chuck a subscribe and a like on the vid. Also, don't forget to check out my sponsor, Northeast Diecast, who continues to be adding a really interesting range of 200 and 400 scale diecast models to his website, which has an excellent existing range of models on it already. There are models available for all price brackets, but there are some really rare releases up on the site, well worth checking out and see if there's anything you want there. And if you do check it out, don't forget to use the code Yesterday's Airlines 15 for 15% off your order at Northeast Diecast. I've been using that code. It makes a big difference. It's well worth it. So use the code Yesterday's Airlines 15 for 15% off. But let's, without further ado, get in and see what JC Wings have announced in this November/December set. So, starting with the Airbuses, as always, it doesn't initially look like a particularly promising set, because the first model that we've got to look at here is a Korean Air A321neo. It's registered HL8509. Now, there's been a lot of Korean Air recently, but this isn't allied to that. This is just an artifact of the way JC Wings releases models, in the sense that they put out a release of one and then they split the production and put out a second version of that a couple of years later. And in this case, they've come a bit of cropper, because Korean Air have gone and created a new livery, and they're left with this old version of an A321neo in the previous livery, which they haven't got rid of yet. So they already released HL8505 in November 2022, and no doubt exactly the same time that was made, they would have made this aircraft 8509, and it's just been 3 years or so in between them actually releasing it. If it wasn't bad enough that Korean Air got a new livery, so people probably aren't as interested in this old scheme, then it also is the fact that NG Models released a pair of A321neos in this older scheme in January 2024, and they're significantly better than the JC Wings effort with its gigantic engines, slightly misshapen, everything really. So this is not hitting any marks for me. It's not necessary. It's a repeat of a previous release, and it's been made better by other manufacturers beforehand. So this one is going into the gas guzzle category straight away. Next up is a better selection. This one is an Ethiopian Airlines A350-1000, registered ET BAX. That's Bravo Alpha X-ray. And this one's available in flaps up and flaps down. Now, it may seem familiar, but it's actually not as familiar as it seems. And that the reason it's familiar is because several brands have already released ET Bravo Alpha Whiskey in 400 scale. Indeed, it's been released by Aviation 400, Phoenix, and JC Wings themselves. But that aircraft was slightly different. It had the first A350-1000 in Africa sticker on the front of it. This one is wearing the standard scheme, doesn't have that sticker on the front, so it is different to the previous one. Now, although I don't love the JC Wings Gemini A350 mould, it isn't disastrous either, and nobody else has produced this one to date, so it's actually not a dreadful selection. And looking at the actual model itself, it actually looks like it turned out quite well. So actually this one I don't think is a particularly bad choice, and in fact I'm willing to put this one up into High Flyer, being a airline livery combo that hasn't been made for an A350-1000 yet. I know it's very similar to the first release, but it isn't the same. That is all of the Airbuses this month, but next model up is a CRJ. In fact, it's a CRJ 1000, and this mould is obviously a mould which debuted this year and has been seeing some good usage actually, especially considering there aren't that many CRJ 1000s out there to be released. It's certainly seeing a lot better usage than their Antonov 26 mould, which barely ever gets used, which is a real shame. So this is the 8th CRJ 1000 which has been released. They've not all been by JC Wings. There's been one from Gemini, and a couple have been released for Airshop Diecast in Indonesia as well, but the rest have been JC Wings editions. I really like this CRJ 1000 mould. It's pretty good, and this one's a great choice. It's HOP by Air France, which had previously been Brit Air, and I believe that these guys were quite a large operator. They operated at least 13 CRJ 1000s, and I quite like the HOP scheme. It's got a little bit of something to it, I'd say. It's not bad, and I think this is a really solid use of the CRJ 1000 mould, especially, as I say, when there aren't that many airlines that are actually fluid. In fact, we're already kind of running slightly out of airlines that have flown CRJ 1000s to get models made for. Can't say this is bad at all. I think this is really good. There's only been one other HOP release previously, and that was a Herpa Embraer 170, at least in this livery. There was a 190 in a slightly different and much more boring HOP livery made by Gemini in 2024. Anyway, I'm putting this one up in a supersonic. I think this one's great. Really like the CRJ 1000. Really like to see slightly more unusual types being released, and good to see some decent usage of this new mould. Into the Boeings, and we've first up got quite an unusual Boeing 747-100. This aircraft, N905NA, you might recognise that registration as being one of the 747s which was used by NASA, and so it clearly has an American Airlines heritage to it. Now, we've been seeing quite a few N905NA releases in recent times because Patriot have been making a few for their shuttle carriers, because this aircraft was converted into a shuttle carrier. Now, JC Wings haven't got that version, but what they have got is the old Big Bird mould, and they have made here N905NA, presumably before she was converted into the shuttle carrier, but wearing these early NASA colours. The issue here really is that I feel that the only reason they're doing this is to kind of rain on HX Models Parade, because it's an HX mould that Patriot are using. And the age of this Big Bird mould is really showing. Now, it doesn't look dreadful in the images I'm seeing, but it doesn't look great either. They have added aerials to it and the SATCOM dome behind the hump, but it doesn't look spectacular, does it? It's just showing its age of the seam, the wing join, those things. So even though it's not bad, it's really kind of aged in comparison to 747s that we're getting from other brands, especially HX. Now, interestingly, when you look at the box for this model, it does appear to suggest there will be a second version coming with the elements that are required to hold the space shuttle and the modified horizontal stab. So again, I get the feeling this is just JC Wings doing its best to try and compete against Patreon HX, but it can only use what it's got, and what it's got is this old 747. It's not doing much for me because of those reasons. I'm going to put this one into Workhorse, even though it is reasonably unique in terms of the livery. It just isn't really doing much for me, I'm afraid. Model number 5 is a Cathay Cargo 747-8 freighter. And again, this one arguably could be seen as not doing a huge amount. It's registered to B Lima Juliet Kilo, and it's got the new big Cathay Cargo titles. This has been made by Phoenix in 2023, and this year there have been 3 versions of BLJN made by YY Wings using the HX Models mould. One of those would have been flaps down, and one of them would have probably been interactive, and one of them the standard. This one's a standard, so it's not unique. It has been made by others beforehand. The 747-8 from JC is quite competitive with the HX 747-8, which isn't as good as their 747 Classic, I have to say. So I'm willing to give this one more of a benefit of the doubt. This one's obviously probably easier to find than the YY Wings releases too, although they are getting out into Western retailers nowadays. This one looks pretty decent from the pictures I'm seeing. I'm willing to put this one up into High Flyer, but that's a little generous. You could perhaps argue this one was also a Workhorse mold, but I'm willing to put this one up into High Flyer. Yeah. Now, the last model of the models which have model pictures related to is a 777 freighter, and this one is Central Airlines with these Young Express aspects to it. It's B2082. Now, they made this previously. They made B2079 this year, and they made an interactive version of this. And frankly, why you would not get the interactive version for this 777 freighter is beyond me, because it is really cool and it doesn't have the nose cargo door seam issues that people have taken issue with some of the interactive 747s. So yeah, I don't understand why you wouldn't have got the interactive one if you wanted one of these. This one is not interactive. It is basically a re-release. I'm just going to put this one into Workhorse. Even though it's very nice, it is basically the same, just with a different reg. Okay, and that takes us out of all of the coming soon versions, of which that's half the release set. We now have the usual artwork and photo representations of models that are future releases, which will get made, but probably not for quite some time, almost certainly more than a year. So we'll begin those with an A220, and for all of these, any excitement has to be, slightly, damped down by the fact you don't know when the model's actually going to get released. Now, this first A220 is Air Canada, and it is C Foxtrot Hotel Mike Oscar, and it's wearing Zootopia 2, that's the movie, Zootopia 2 special scheme. It does seem like a lot of these special schemes get given to JC Wings because they introduce extra licensing hassle, which Gemini can't be bothered with. Because Gemini have actually made an Air Canada A220. They made a version back in 2022. That version wore the standard Air Canada colours, and it looked okay, but it does illustrate the issues that exist with this A220 mould, which mainly are at the front end in terms of the nose gear and the shape of the nose itself and that whole cockpit region. But still, it looked okay. I'm sure this one will be fine as well, but it's a little bit of a... Well, it's actually not an unpleasant special scheme, I guess, but Zootopia 2 strikes me as being a pretty meh movie and not something to be getting overly excited about. I'm still willing to put this one into High Flyer. We don't get a lot of A220s, and it's good to see some, but yeah, again, it's kind of skirting the edge, I think, of Workhorse to High Flyer, especially given the likely long lead time for this one. The next model is an A320 Classic. It's DAS Golf Echo. It's Condor, and it's wearing another special scheme, and this is the Eintracht Frankfurt colours, the football club. I actually can't say I'm loving it, this scheme, the black and white stripes, though it does fit very much in with Condor's current scheme. You can almost do a football-related sub-collection. There have been quite a lot of football-related schemes over the years for various teams like Manchester City and such, and for various events, World Cups. And that'd be quite a cool sub-collection. I wonder if anyone's ever done that. And if you have, then this would fit right in there. There haven't really been other Condor A320s, or at least certainly not in recent times anyway. That JC Wings did make another special scheme, a retro version in 2014, and then there's a Herpa one which is even older with a peanut special scheme, I think, and that looks awful. This one will be fine. The Condor, the JC Wings A320 with the CFM engines, it's okay. It's not great. This is a kind of special scheme where I'm thinking, yeah, I don't really care that much for it, but I imagine there's a market out there for it, and there hasn't been a lot of European narrow-body equipment in recent times. I think I'm going to put this one up in the high flyer as well, which is, again, perhaps being pretty generous for it. The third model, I'm going to be less generous towards. This one's a Jetstar A320 Neo VH Alpha 5 Alpha. The JC Wings Neo mould, just like the A321, not great. And this model has been made before as well. It was made in April by NG Models once again, who've beaten JC to it by some distance. So this is a pointless release because it's never going to be as nice as that NG, which you probably bought anyway. So regardless of any possible complaints about height or window line on the NG, which actually I don't think are enormously founded anyway, this one won't be as good. So I'm going to put this one down in the gas guzzler, join that Korean Neo, I think. JC Wings have, in recent times, been getting a bit more back into retro models, and the next model very much illustrates that. It is a Lufthansa 707-320. It's registered D A box. That's Alpha Bravo Oscar X-ray, and there hasn't been a Lufthansa 707 for 11 years, and all of the previous ones are coming from Aero Classics, which isn't a bad thing. The Aero Classics 707 is excellent. To find one that isn't Aero Classics, you've got to go back all the way to 2002, when Gemini Jets made one on their vastly inferior mould. So there have been some good Lufthansa 707s made previously by AC. This mould is seamless and it's got aerials. So it should be good as long as they get the cockpit in the right place. This one has got some potential to be a really good release, and we don't see enough of this kind of release in 400 scale anymore, especially outside of Aero Classics. So happy to give this one a high flyer. That leaves us 3 models left to discuss. First up is a China Airlines 777-300 B18055, I think it is. And this one again has another Zootopia 2 scheme on it, but one that's a lot less interesting than the Air Canada scheme. It's not doing anything for me, this one. All they've done is something kind of similar to Air Canada, but on a much bigger aircraft. It doesn't work. You just got some random animals sprayed around different parts of the fuselage, completely randomly, it seems. And yeah, it's not doing anything for me at all, this one, I have to say. I'm going to put this one into Workhorse. It's a NAF special scheme, and we see lots of China Airlines wide bodies already. Another special scheme makes up the penultimate model of this set, and this is my favourite airline, Qatar Airways. The reg is A7BEG. However, this Formula One scheme is super nice. Unlike a lot of Qatar Airways special schemes, which are often pretty boring, this one really rocks. Love the colours, love the way the Oryx fits in with what they've done with the F1 logo and those red lines on the tail. It looks really classy. And it has, though, been announced by somebody else, and that someone else is NG Models. They've announced an Ultimate Collection and a Standard Collection version of this for release in the near future, though they haven't specified the date. It will probably be January, February next year. It's going to get out way before this JC Wings version, which will be equally as nice and does have a flaps down variant going for it too. So yeah, it's really up to you which one of these you prefer if you're aiming for it. I imagine Phoenix will release it too, though theirs won't be as good as either the JC or the NG. Not sure what to do in terms of placing this, in terms of the ranking here. It's a sort of model that if it was going to be released next month, I'd be high flyering. But I think this enormous delay and the fact NG are going to beat them to it means I'm just going to put it down into workhorse as well. And that leaves just one model left to discuss, and it's yet another special scheme. There's just this epidemic almost of special schemes nowadays. Some of them are nice, some of them are entirely mediocre. And of these 6 future models which have been announced, 7 future models that have been announced in this set, 5 of them wear special liveries, which is just not particularly, surely standard schemes are largely more sought after by collectors. Anyway, whatever. This one is CCBGM, a Latam 7879. Don't really know why Latam are putting a Harry Potter livery on one of their Dreamliners, and I can't be bothered to find out. I am not a fan of Harry Potter, and I never have been. I have seen the movies because my son maybe watched them, but I do not really appreciate any of it particularly. I didn't find any of it to be interesting or unique. I found it to be really, really boring and not very well put together. But I know I'm probably in the minority and lots of people love Harry Potter. So this model probably does have quite a strong sales potential. It just seems such a random agglomeration of a South American airline, or Chilean airline even, and Harry Potter. So the scheme, it looks okay, I guess, What can you say? It's just a giant wodge of colour on the back of the aircraft, which these Euro white schemes often lend themselves to. Yeah, I just can't get interested in this. So I'm just going to workhorse this. It will turn out really nice. I really hope no one else makes it, but I imagine someone will before it gets released by JC. So yeah, I'm just going to workhorse it. Okay, and that brings us to the end of the ranking portion of the video. What do I think of this set? Well, it's always the same with JC Wings. The models that they're going to release soon are often a bit stodgy and not very interesting. But this month have got a couple of real highlights, I think, with that Hop CRJ. And I like the Ethiopian A350 and the Cathay 747 as well. And then you go to the future models and you have to temper any enthusiasm you have because you've got no idea when they're going to get released and you know they're going to get made by other brands. But looking at these, the Condor is an interesting selection and the Lufthansa 707 too. And the others are nice, but probably will get released by someone else beforehand, except for maybe that A220, which I guess only Herpa could release in its place. So it's hit and miss, as is often the case with JC, but there's some really nice bits and bobs hidden in there, and you just need to be, careful about pre-ordering and be aware of when they're going to get actually released to market. And I can't see any of these models getting to a retailer before March next year at the earliest. But let's see where JC go next year. I think it feels very much like they're at a crossroad. They've got a huge amount of new mold production going on, but they really struggle to get those or translate those new molds into actual releases. They've got a backlog of quite often mediocre future releases on the way. They must be running out of nearly made models in that giant warehouse. And I really hope there's going to be more interesting and unusual releases from JC in 2026. And I've still got hope that that will be the case. As it is, there's always 1 or 2 models each month which stand out as being worth getting. But it hasn't been a great year for JC in my opinion, and I haven't bought a large number of their models to date in 2025. Okay guys, well that's it for yet another release ranking video. Presumably this December still has further release videos to come for the likes of Gemini and probably Phoenix as well. And so you can look forward to those, but there's going to be other content coming up at the channel. As always, I'm trying to vary what I'm producing at the moment with unboxings and reviews and all that kind of stuff. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully there'll be another video in the next few days. But for now, that is it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time at Yesterday's Airlines.